Good morning. We're going to get started because it is 10 o'clock. I am Melanie at Home Probe, the home inspection company, and you are here to learn more about radon. And so I will share what we have learned over the course of the last several years as our radon department has grown in response to the demand really from the consumer side. And so where we used to say, do you want radon with your home inspection? Now we almost ask, why wouldn't you want radon with your home inspection? And I'm going to show you the ins and the outs so that you know a lot about radon and how to guide your clients to get the inspection that they really want, because the decision making really is all up to them. So with that, if you have questions for me, I will stay after and answer as many as you have, so put them in the Q&A, but otherwise I will share my screen so we can talk more intelligently while we look at some of these pictures. So one of the things that is a big question about radon is it really all it's cracked up to be, or is it like Santa Claus? Like it just doesn't exist, but people really believe in it. And my answer to you is that there are particles that we are testing for, so it does exist. If you are interested in knowing what the actual harm is, I'm going to share that in this presentation as well. But even if you want to believe that radon is like Santa Claus, that it can't hurt you, or that it's just imaginary, the issue is that consumers do care about their radon levels based on the information and the science from the EPA. And so it does affect the value of a home, and it affects how people feel about living there. And so for those reasons, it makes sense to talk about radon as a real thing. So the first question we have is, what is radon? So radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas. It comes into our air as the uranium breaks down, and so as rock is decaying. It's found actually across the globe. So the EPA in the United States is the source that we look to for recommendations, but the World Health Organization also has recommendations related to radon. And so it is something that affects, it's not just limited to one particular area. And the way that it finds its way into a house is through what's called the stack effect. The house acts like a chimney, and as hot air is coming up and trying to escape the top, cold air is pulled in, and that's pulling in radon gas. And so that's what radon is. The EPA and the CDC say that about 7% of homes nationally have radon levels at 4.0, which is their recommended level for mitigation, or higher, and that's about 1 out of every 15 homes. And in Georgia, those rates are a little bit higher, the market area that we look at. So this is the EPA map. Now radon can be anywhere. These are our two markets, South Carolina and Georgia, and you can see a concentrated area of radon in the Atlanta area. And for that reason, this is a map that's been put together by the University of Georgia for radon levels, and we'll look and see where we are. So you can see we're in Atlanta. In Atlanta, in the main area of Atlanta, it's about 15 to 21% of homes have high radon levels. But if we go to West Atlanta, we're at 36% and above, or Northeast Atlanta, you're at 36% and above. And even just a little bit further west, you're at the 29 to 35% range. So my radon techs say that it follows the Piedmont. They can sometimes, they can see trends on where we're getting high radon results in some areas, but we recommend testing for all of the areas, just like the EPA does in our Atlanta market. In our South Carolina market, we only do testing upon request from buyers, and that's because we are concentrated on the coast, and the coast does not have issues related to radon. So if you think about how many homes your buyers see, or how many listings you take a year, those numbers start making sense. So if we're at the 15 to 21%, that's about 1 in every 5 homes. So if your buyer is looking at 5 homes, 1 in 5 chances that there is a radon issue in the home. And the best question to ask ourselves is, when does a buyer want to know that they have a radon, that they have high radon levels? Is it before they move into the house, or is it after they've lived there for several years and they're preparing the house for a seller? And I think that every buyer, almost every buyer, depending on their risk tolerance, would probably answer that they would rather know those levels going in. So what we have seen is that that is the case. We have been, when I first started working at HomeProbe 8 years ago, we had 12 radon monitors, and we had one person that picked up radon monitors every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, only afternoons, and not even every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. There just wasn't a lot of demand. This March, which is our busiest month of the year, we saw a lot of consumer demand. I think one of the things that's happening is that as buyers are paying top dollar for the house, even if the seller isn't willing to accommodate any repairs or changes, the buyer still wants to know more about what they're getting. And when they're paying top dollar for the house, they want to make sure that that it's going to keep them warm and safe and dry. And so they are wanting more information about those houses than they did even 5 years ago. So this March, we saw 75% of our buyers requesting radon tests, and that's a drastically different percentage than we saw last March. So if you'd like to participate with me and take a guess of, sorry, not last March, March of 2016, I told you we're drastically higher than we were then. What do you think the percentage of my buyers who wanted radon tests were in March of 2016? You can send your answer to the Q&A. I'll give us a few minutes and I will answer it later. And if you are the closest, then I will send you a $25 Amazon card for playing my game with me. So let's move on to how to manage the radon in a real estate transaction. So we're going to talk about 3 things today. We're going to talk about what to know about radon as a real estate agent, what to say about radon or not say, as the case may be, and then what to do in terms of managing that radon test during your transaction. So let's go with what to know first. We want to know about the risks. Why do we care about radon? It actually affects safety and it affects a home's value. And let me explain why. The EPA is the one that makes the recommendations on testing for radon. So those are the recommendations that we choose to follow. They recommend that every home be tested in a real estate transaction. They also recommend, as part of a home's maintenance, that we test then as well. But we are most focused at HomeProbe in that real estate transaction because that is the time period where people are thinking about the condition of their home and wanting to take proactive measures in it right before they decide to purchase it. And so the EPA recommends it's a great time to test for radon levels. They recommend that testing for condos additionally, if those condos are under the 3rd floor. So 3rd floor and above, it doesn't mean that you can't have a radon issue there. It just means it's so unlikely that it's in the EPA's mind, not a recommended testing area. This is a recommendation and not a requirement. And so it's important to remember that there are no laws about radon testing. And right now in Georgia and in South Carolina, the lawyers and the lenders do not require radon testing in a real estate transaction. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes over time. As you know, we are getting more and more concerned with our health as we've had a health scare over the last couple of years. And as real estate values are going up, people are expecting more out of their houses in terms of keeping them warm and safe and dry. Radon is the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. So if you have ever heard of someone who died of lung cancer, and they were not a smoker, it was likely radon gas that caused their lung cancer. It's said, I think this is from the U.S. Surgeon General, more people die from radon, lung cancer caused by radon than die from drunk driving every year in the United States, and from falls and from drownings and from home fires. And think about how, you know, when we talk to buyers, one of their biggest concerns is about especially in an older home, is about electricity, because they want to make sure that they're going to be safe. And so look at the number of people that die in a home fire and the number of people that die from radon. So for sure, this is something that those that those buyers would be interested in. About 1% person, or about 58 people die from radon lung cancer per day in the United States. Georgia is the 7th in the nation for in terms of the radon-related lung cancer deaths. And this just gives you an idea of the risk from radon gas. So I think it's fascinating to look at it in terms of what that risk is comparable to. So the first column is the radon level, and we're looking at an average level, which I'll explain to you in a little bit. 1.3 is the average indoor radon level. So, and then 0.4 is the average outdoor radon level. And reducing radon below 2.0 is really difficult. Most mitigation companies won't even look at it. So at that level, about 2 people out of every 1,000 would get lung cancer. When you get to the level of 2, that doubles to about 4 people, and it's about the risk of dying from poison. So, and the EPA recommends consider fixing your home if it's between 2 and 4. It really depends on your risk tolerance, which we'll get to in a moment. At 4, we've almost doubled it again, and now we're at 7 in 1,000 people. And at this point, it's about the risk of dying in a car accident. And the EPA's recommendation is to fix your home. At 8, we almost double it again, and it's 4 times the risk of dying in a fall, and the EPA recommends fixing your home. And when you get at the 20 level, it's 35 times the risk of drowning, and the EPA recommends fixing your home. So this 4.0 level is where the EPA just drew a line and said, this is the point at which it makes sense. You know, we're always looking at resources. And so at this point, the EPA has determined it's worth the resources to mitigate a home, to mitigate the likelihood of getting lung cancer from radon. And so that number is 4.0. It's 4.0 and above. It's not 4.0 and below. So 4.0 and above is where the EPA recommends radon mitigation or action. And what's important to remember is this is a continuum. So you can see there, it's not that there is 100% risk at 4.0 and 0% risk at 3.9. It's on a continuum. And so I like to compare it to maybe like UV rays. And so the more exposure you get to them, the higher your risk level is. And so it depends on your risk tolerance for how much is okay for you. The EPA has made a recommendation, and then every buyer gets to decide whether they're going to follow that EPA recommendation or not. So let's look at a test where we would consider it, or the EPA would consider it a failed test. You can see that there's an overall average and an EPA average. And the difference between those two is the first 4 hours of the test, the EPA deems not reliable results. And so the EPA throws out those first 4 hours. Normally, in almost every test that we do, that the overall average and the EPA average will both either be passing or failing. There are a few circumstances once in a while where we will get an EPA average. It's usually when it's really close to 4.0, where the EPA average is a fail and the overall average is pass. And again, remember, we are looking at those first 4 hours, and that monitor has been in an inspector's truck or it's been in somebody else's house. And so it really is the monitor, giving the monitor time to calibrate with the home. And so the EPA's recommendation is to follow their average. But again, buyers get to decide what they're going to do on their own. So I like to think of this as giving the buyer information and then letting them make their own decision. So radon can affect health, and radon can also affect the value of a home in that their repair costs can be similar to other systems. So think about a furnace or HVAC. It's a little higher usually than a water heater, but those things that go on the key factors page for clients, radon levels would go there as well, because it's a safety issue, and the cost is usually, I'm trying to remember the company that we recommend for mitigation. I think their cost to fix starts around $2,000. We've seen it go up to higher, like $8,000 when you have to get a structural engineer involved, or when they have to do something like dig through a granite foundation. Those types of complications can add to the radon mitigation costs. Also, crawl spaces. So it's more unusual to have high radon in a crawl space, but the crawl space is more costly to fix because one of the things they have to do is encapsulate the crawl space and then take the radon out. So last chance to put in the Q&A. What do you think our buyer percentage was in 2016 for wanting a radon test? Do I tell you here? 28.5% were our buyers in 2016. So Zach Johnston, you are the winner. Barbara will send me your email address and Barbara will send you a $25 gift card for Amazon. All right, so step number 2 is what to say or not say as a real estate agent about radon. And I love this t-shirt because my emphasis right now is on giving the decision-making back to our buyers where it really belongs. The most common question that we get as home inspectors is some variation of, should I buy this house? Sometimes it's the cousin question of, would you buy this house, to the home inspector? But it's some, people just want validation in their decision-making. And the problem with them having validation that comes from an external source and not themselves is that when something happens to change a condition, which is going to happen in a house, then suddenly they start doubting themselves. And so when we can give the buyers their confidence to make their own best decisions, they end up being happier in their home and in the transaction and with their real estate agent. And so what I want to do is let buyers make their own decisions, give them concrete, objective information, and then let them make their own decisions. So I have a couple of examples of where this has gone south, and they come from not that long ago. So one was I've heard from clients that agents have said, oh, you don't need a test. I've never seen them come back high. So not a great place to be as a real estate agent because they do come back high, and we've seen them come back high on condos. We've seen them come back high on townhomes. We've seen them come back high all over the place. We had a townhome where I was booking the inspection with the agent and their client. And it was funny because the client was hemming and hawing about radon, whether they wanted it included or not, and theirs came back high on a townhome. And I was so grateful that agent did not say, I've never seen one come back high on a townhouse, because they can come back high. And so the only way to know is to actually test. I've also heard it's okay, it's not on a basement. And while basements do tend to have more frequent high results, I will tell you that there's been a time where HomeProbe left a radon test running in someone's home and did not give them their results in their due diligence period. And it was on a house with a crawl space, and turns out it was high. So when one of the times we've bought a radon mitigation system, it was for a house with a crawl space. So this is a graphic to show you that radon can get into the home no matter how the foundation is there. And there's no way to tell based on how old or how new the house is. I'm going to go over some of those myths. But as an agent, my suggestion would be to give buyers information about what does the EPA say, or ask the inspection company, or ask a radon mitigation company. I'm happy for them to go directly to an expert and then make your own decision. And we have a white paper on radon testing that talks about the EPA's recommendation levels. They can also just go to the EPA website and see. So it's okay, it's not on a basement. The basement high, our highest basement so far has been 46.5, but our lowest basement is only 0.2. So there's a wide range on basement. Crawl space and slab, we also have low ranges, but let's look at our highs. This is just in the last year. Our high for a crawl space was 10.7. And our high for a slab was 34. Crawl spaces made up about 4% of our high results, and slabs made up about 17%. So the data I would give a client is just that data, and then make your own decision based on your own risk tolerance. And really, when you think about the price point on a radon test, they currently are $224 with an inspection with us. If I told you in 5 years, would you rather have known now for $224, or would you rather in 5 years, when you find out you have high radon levels, wouldn't you rather pay $224 to have those 5 years back of being able to mitigate and being able to make that decision yourself? It's okay, it's not on a condo. So our condo low is 0.3, but our condo high this year is 9.1. Probably the most misjudged thing to say is, it's okay, it's got a mitigation system, so we don't need a radon test. Now, that might be true. If there is a mitigation system, it means somebody has already been alerted to the fact that there was a radon problem and wanted to fix it. And so often that seller may be getting regular tests. And so I would ask the seller if they have a recent test, a test within the last year. If they don't have a test within the last year, I would suggest getting a radon test. And the reason why is we're already bird dogged to the fact that this house has a radon problem, and mitigation systems are only as good as the system is functioning. And so it's sort of like saying, don't test the air conditioning in this house because they have a system. Well, every buyer I meet wants us to test the air conditioning to make sure the air conditioner is working, because systems are mechanical parts. And so those mechanical parts can fail. And so that's the whole reason we have a home inspection. And so if a house has a mitigation system, it makes sense to go ahead and get the radon test. And here is a pretty recent example from a house that had a mitigation system. We were just waiting for this one to come back, I remember, and I was talking to the agent, and they were saying, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be all okay because it has a mitigation system, and it came back high. And so I called her and said, guess what, came back high. Just wanted you to have a heads up on that. So on those, it's almost the best case scenario for a high result, because usually those mitigation systems are guaranteed by the vendor that put them in. And so often that's not an additional charge for a seller. It's okay, it's not on a townhome, is also problematic. So this is one that came back high off of a townhouse, came back at 15. So you can substitute old, not near Stone Mountain, it's a purple house, whatever adjective you want, and you're just making an assumption. And I think assumptions generally turn out to bite us all where we don't want to be bit later on. And so I would point buyers to facts and suggest that they make their own decision, and it doesn't need to be a tough decision. Looking at the ages, out of the last 101 years of building houses, only 23 of those years last year did not come back with a high result. So my oldest with a high result was built in 1915, and my newest was 2020. So that was earlier on in 2021. I would bet you we've had a 2021 already come back with high results. This just goes to point out that you can't tell exactly from where it is. So this is the same style house, meaning the same foundation style, the same age, roughly the same size, on the same street, on the same day. One came back above action level and one came back very well below it. So that tells us a lot about what to say and what not to say, and gives us some facts that we can give buyers. And I'm always happy to talk to your buyers, and so is our whole client services department. We're happy to talk to your buyers about radon, and our assumption is that they're going to get the test, and so we include it. We require a buyer or their agent to opt out if they don't want the radon test. And the reason for that is that we've had too many, oh, the buyer's dad goes to the walkthrough with them and looks at the agent and says, why didn't you get this test? Or we have people call back all the time and say, oh, can you send me my radon results? And they may have worked with us a few years ago, and I don't have radon results for them because they didn't get their test. And they're like, well, why didn't anyone tell me? And I'm like, well, we sent you emails. I'm I don't know if your agent probably talked to you about it, right? Nobody remembers. This is the hurry up phase of the hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. They've just come from the waiting to go under contract, and you say, go, get yourself an inspection. And all of a sudden they're dealing with inspection and appraisal and a lot of decision making all at once. And they're not reading their emails very well. They don't even often read their inspection reports very well. And so it's really, I would rather cover somebody with a test who maybe doesn't want one, and then I can give them money back, but I can't, if you did want one, I can't give you test results sooner. So that's why we do it that way. Let's go to phase 3 is what to do. How can you best manage radon levels in a real estate transaction? And this is whether you are the listing agent or the buyer's agent. I'm going to give you some tips. So the first thing is to advise the seller. Now, if you work with us, we will advise the seller for buyers via their agent. So we send what closed conditions mean to the seller's agent, and ask them to pass it on to the seller. We also send a reminder, and we also have a little tag that hangs in the house advising the seller that there is a radon test running. Sometimes sellers get weirded out and they're like, something's taking pictures of me. It does not have a camera. It does not emit radon. It only collects a sample of the air every hour for 48 to 100 hours and measures the radon levels. So it is not emitting any radon into the house. But I will tell you, sellers like to know about these things ahead of time. And sometimes they call us and say, what did you leave behind? And again, that might be an issue if they weren't reading an email or something like that, but be sure and tell the sellers so that they're prepared for the radon test, and that they're also prepared for us to go back out and collect the radon monitor to be able to download the test. So a misconception is what closed building conditions mean. What it means is treat the house like you normally would during any other season. So if it's gorgeous fall weather or spring weather, like we're experiencing, you don't, often people will leave windows open or doors open for extended periods of time. That's not acceptable for a radon test because we don't do that year round. So we're trying to get an average, we're consolidating it down to 48 hours, but we want to get it, an average based on how it normally would operate. If you normally run the HVAC, leave it on, just don't have it be on auto versus fan. You don't want a whole house fan running. And then remind sellers that we're going to need to access the home to pick up the test 2 business days later. So one thing that you can always ask is, where was the monitor placed? And we have standards at HomePro built around that follow the EPA standards. And we call it our 4-3-2-1 rule, meaning how far off the ground it has to be, how far away from external walls, and that sort of thing. And if you're working a listing and the basement has a dirt floor and somebody did a radon test there, you may want to consider asking where the radon monitor was placed and make sure that it follows those EPA standards for radon placement. The most common question that we get or comment that we get is, oh, the radon, it was raining, so the radon level is higher, so please retest. We do not retest unless the rain levels meet the EPA's standard for severe weather, which is almost a tornado in Georgia. And then we will instigate the retest. So if you see that it's been raining and you're like, shoot, I think that's going to affect the radon levels, it likely might. How's that for precision? The best time to decide, hey, we don't want these results, we would rather have results from another 48 hours, is before we have the results. Because once we get high results, if the buyer says, hey, let's retest, there's in the back of the mind, the buyer is like, those seller knows that we had high results. They might be opening windows and doors and trying to adjust the levels to make them lower. And now there's some distrust where there was trust before. So if we have not released results, I will retest for free. If we have released results, we do not retest, even for a fee, under almost every circumstance. And that's just because it never works out well. So I can give you some examples, but think about the amount of rain that we get in Georgia. Nobody's disputing the fact that this house has a radon issue when there is rain. And so now it's up to the buyer to make their decision. Do I want to live in a house that has a radon issue when it's raining? And most of the time when it's raining, we're not leaving our doors and windows open to also offset the radon. So we don't recommend retesting because the EPA doesn't recommend it. And also because there's no way to artificially raise a radon test, but there are ways to artificially lower it. The solutions are to take care of this ahead of time. So, you know, if your dog gets messy, clip their ears back in a ponytail. You can do a 100-hour test. That will often offset a storm period that might, you know, spike results, or request us to retest before the results are released. And these are the EPA definitions of severe weather, which we have built into a standard. Spikes are expected on a radon test, so it is not a reason to throw out the test, and it is not a reason to mitigate just because there is one spike. We like to think about, like, if I have boiling water and that's dangerous, if I'm pouring just drops of it into a glass, that boiling water is going to be offset by the lukewarm water. So you want to treat radon results like any other safety concern in the house. Mitigation is effective, and it is not, this is what it looks like on the outside of the house, so it's not that intensive. If you want to stay after with me and play a couple of high-low games, I'll show you some of the houses that we did radon tests for, and you can guess ahead of time whether they were high or low. And it just goes to point out that it's difficult to tell by looking at a house. So we did a house on a crawl space in Virginia Highland, built in 1920. Result was high. We did a house on a crawl space in Westview, built in 1920 and totally renovated. Test was low. Oh no, that was high as well. Sorry, those were two crawl space ones. Finished basement, Avondale Estates, built in 1970. The test was low. Slab and crawl space, built in Avondale Estates, built in 1931. High. Finished basement in Sandy Springs, built in 1995. That one was high. The most important thing that you do here is partner with a professional. Our radon program has been established and overseen, and our standards are set and reviewed annually by someone certified as a residential radon measurement technician by the NRPP, the National Radon Proficiency Program. We have also procedures in place by our client services team that will remind the listing agent, they remind the buyer's agent, they remind the buyer, and we give that buyer plenty of time to opt out. They can opt out all the way until the results are released. And then we follow a standard of practice, and that's super important because without standards, you're just using somebody's guess and their opinion. And when you start getting opinions in, you stop being able to make reliable, repeatable results. And so I want you to know that it is very important that there are standards for both the home inspection and for radon testing, and that's part of the price point that goes into establishing these tests, is to be able to ensure quality in meeting those standards. So that's why we're able to look at where we always take a picture of where our radon monitor was placed, and then we can always go back to it and say, was this within our standards? Was it as far off the ground as it was supposed to be in inches? Was it as far away from exterior walls? So that's why we have those standards. And so it's not like, is there a better place or a worse place? There's an acceptable place and a non-acceptable place, and it's done by objective standards. So if you have any questions, we're always happy to answer that. And if you need help booking an inspection, you can find us at home-probe.com. I will stay after to answer any questions. It was good to see y'all, and thank you for taking the time to learn more about radon. Your buyers and sellers will thank you later.